Welcome to our SUSECON digital session, SAP HANA High Availability and Data Integrity using SUSE clusters. It's about SAP HANA HR providers for SUSE cluster integration. So we will show in this demo that we have two such interesting HRDR providers, the SR status change and the SAP HANA system replication takeover, which is a pre-event, as we see later. And we'll see how it is working, how it is configured, and how we can see it in tooling that it is working. Coming to SAP HANA system replication status change to track changes in the system replication to increase the data integrity of your SAP HANA database. How it is working. So we have two HANAs, primary, secondary. We have a database client doing changes, commits to the database. We have a hook being called by the primary database, and we have a cluster attribute for interaction between SAP HANA, the hook, and the cluster. Now the system replication is broken, and the database has pending commits. So we couldn't process any longer, and there is a timeout on those commits. So after some time in the failure handling, the system replication right is now broken because the timeout of the pending commit is still hanging. But then the HANA is doing a call out to the SUSE hook. The SUSE hook is setting a cluster attribute, marking that the secondary is not any longer a takeover candidate. And after that, the hook is reporting back to SAP HANA that it could release the commits. So now you will see that the commits are getting on green, so are released. But the system location, of course, is now broken. The secondary does not get those changes, so the cluster shouldn't take over. With that, we see the recovery of the system replication. And this is also being processed in the same way. So the HANA is calling the hook is setting the cluster attribute, and the hook is reporting back to SAP HANA that the cluster has been informed correctly. So now the secondary is a takeover candidate again. And after that, we could say, okay, the system replication is completely recovered. So this is how the interaction between those two components, the SAP HANA database, the hook, and the cluster, and our cluster attributes on the other side, is working. Yeah. Now let's see for things here to remember. Two things I want to focus on. The system replication event is immediately informing the cluster about the changes. And this call, as it comes before the commit has been released, closes completely the gap. Let us jump into the demo. We see here in the SAP HANA Studio 3 systems being in system replication, and we go to the configuration tab, entering HRDR as a search string, and we get the provider string for our SAP HANA system replication multi-target thing. You see a provider, which is relating to the Python script and Python script object internally, the path and the execution order. In the trace section, we have for each provider has been active a thing like a log level here set to info. Now we are a bit looking in the diagnostic files. We are selecting the file on the master name server of a primary, and in our 6 trace file we find entries being related to our thing. We are searching for HRDR provider. You can see that you have some callouts there. You can track and you can jump through the log file, looking how often it has been called, and then we could see are there also logs of our Python hook scripts. Yes, we have also implemented that, so that you can see in the HANA traces what the hook being calling to the cluster is being reporting. So you have it from the HANA perspective in one view up to this status. So up to the interface. Then we are checking one of those things. You see such a Python dictionary here, which is showing the called values to the hook script. Last not least, we want to see how the initialization of the hooks is working. The search key here would be loading HRDR provider, and we find multiple of those entries here. And there you can see that a hook has been loaded during either the HANA start or the name server start, or if the admin requires a reload of the HR providers. Then you will see such loading report entries here. Again, we are immediately informing the cluster about status changes right before the commit is being released. And we are jumping to the takeover, the pre-takeover hook script. We need to differ between the admin running in a cluster, and we have a pair of a primary and secondary. Now we have either a cluster request or an admin. Here now we simulate an admin, and we want to block that as our takeover, as it would interference with a cluster action. It's going to the secondary, the request of a takeover. So the secondary is calling the hook, checking a cluster attribute or multiple attributes, checking if a resource has been running under cluster control, or if the cluster or everything is set to maintenance. Now the hook reports back, it's to be blocked, the system replication takeover, because the cluster does work on this resource and it should not be done by the admin. And then the system replication client command gets this request being declined. So now jumping into one more demo, having a look on that in the SAP HANA cockpit. Going further to the cockpit, we will see that we have 3 databases there. Selecting one of those, we get to the overview. A lot of tiles we have there. We are scrolling down to the system replication tile being placed here, in my case at the right side at the bottom, and we have an overview of the system replication topology. Here we see that in tier 1 we have S2, and in tier 2 we have 2 of them, so multi-target, S1 and S2. And on one of them we're now calling the takeover while the cluster is working, and we want to see if this has been processed or been declined as discussed before. Calling this, the system takeover command is running, and then you get an error message by the pre-takeover hook, and it reports that the return code was not 0, so the process is declined. Let's see how system replication takeover requests are working. If they are valid, then the hook is reporting a green to the secondary, and the takeover process is being handled. In this case, the former secondary now gets the new primary. The system replication source, so the system replication is now going from this side. And of course, this is not the complete system replication. The old HANA primary, the former primary, must be registered, getting the new secondary. This could be either been done by the cluster or by the admin if you are in the maintenance mode. And now you have your system replication available again. Yeah, so we have seen 2 good things as examples of an integration. The system replication status change, where you are getting reported into the cluster, and the pre-takeover request, which could be permitted for the cluster and blocked for the admin to increase the data integrity. And with that, thank you for attending this session.